Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. was born on December 31, 1943, in Roswell, New Mexico, to Irma Louise, née Swope, 1922–2010, and Captain Henry John Dutch Deutschendorf Sr., 1920–1982, a United States Army Air Forces pilot stationed at Roswell Army Airfield. Captain Deutschendorf Sr. was a decorated pilot who set a number of air speed records in a Convair B-58 Hustler in 1961. In his 1994 autobiography Take Me Home, Denver described his father as a stern man who could not show his love for his children. With a military father, Denver's family moved often, and he found difficulty gaining friends and assimilating with children of his own age. The introverted Denver often felt misplaced but did not know where he truly belonged. While stationed at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona, the Deutschendorfs purchased a home and lived there from 1951 to 1959. Denver lived in Tucson, Arizona, from the age of 6 until 14. During these years, Denver attended Mansfeld Junior High School and was a member of the Tucson, Arizona Boys Chorus for 2 years. He was content in Tucson, but his father was transferred to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. The family later moved to Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas, where Denver graduated from Arlington Heights High School. Denver was distressed with life in Fort Worth, and in his third year of high school, he drove his father's car to California to visit family friends and begin his music career. His father flew to California in a friend's jet to retrieve him, and Denver reluctantly returned to complete his schooling. At age 11, Denver received an acoustic guitar from his grandmother. He learned to play well enough to perform at local clubs by the time he was in college. Denver decided to change his name when Randy Sparks, founder of the New Christy Minstrels, suggested that Deutschendorf would not fit comfortably on a marquee. Denver attended Texas Tech University in Lubbock and sang in a folk music group, the Alpine Trio, while studying architecture. He was also a member of the Delta Tau Delta fraternity. Denver dropped out of Texas Tech in 1963 and moved to Los Angeles, where he sang in folk clubs. In 1965, Denver joined the Chad Mitchell Trio, replacing founder Chad Mitchell. After more personnel changes, the trio later became known as Denver, Boise, and Johnson, John Denver, David Boise, and Michael Johnson. In 1969, Denver abandoned band life to pursue a solo career and released his first album for RCA Records, Rhymes and Reasons. 2 years earlier, he had made a self-produced demo recording of some of the songs he played at his concerts. It included a song Denver had written called, Babe, I Hate to Go, later renamed Leaving on a Jet Plane. He made several copies and gave them out as presents for Christmas. Milt Okun, who produced records for the Chad Mitchell Trio and folk group Peter, Paul and Mary, had become Denver's producer as well. Okun brought the unreleased Jet Plane song to Peter, Paul and Mary. Their rendition hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Denver's song also made it to number 2 in the UK in February 1970, having also made number 1 on the US Cashbox chart in December 1969. RCA did not actively promote Rhymes and Reasons with a tour, but Denver embarked on an impromptu supporting tour throughout the Midwest, stopping at towns and cities, offering to play free concerts at local venues. When he was successful in persuading a school, college, American Legion Hall, or coffeehouse to let him play, Denver distributed posters in the town and usually showed up at the local radio station, guitar in hand, offering himself for an interview. As the writer of Leaving on a Jet Plane, Denver was often successful in gaining some promotional airtime, usually performing 1 or 2 songs live. Some venues let him play for the door, others restricted him to selling copies of the album at intermission and after the show. After several months of this, Denver had built a solid fan base, many of whom remained loyal throughout his career. Denver recorded 2 more albums in 1970, Take Me to Tomorrow and Whose Garden Was This, including a mix of songs he had written and covers. Denver's next album, Poems, Prayers and Promises, 1971, was a breakthrough for him in the United States, thanks in part to the single, Take Me Home, Country Roads, which went to number 2 on the Billboard charts despite the first pressings of the track being distorted. Its success was due in part to the efforts of his new manager, future Hollywood producer Jerry Weintraub, who signed Denver in 1970. Weintraub insisted on a reissue of the track and began a radio airplay campaign that started in Denver, Colorado. Denver's career flourished thereafter, and he had a series of hits over the next 4 years. In 1972, Denver had his first top 10 album with Rocky Mountain High, with its title track reaching the top 10 in 1973. In 1974 and 1975, Denver had a string of 4 No.1 songs, Sunshine on My Shoulders, Annie's Song, Thank God I'm a Country Boy, and I'm Sorry, and 3 number 1 albums, John Denver's Greatest Hits, Back Home Again, and Wind Song. In the 1970s, Denver's on-stage appearance included long blonde hair and wire-rimmed, granny, glasses. His embroidered shirts with images commonly associated with the American West were created by the designer and applique artist Anna Zapp. Weintraub insisted on a significant number of television appearances, including a series of half-hour shows in the United Kingdom. Despite Denver's protests at the time, I've had no success in Britain, I mean none. In December 1976, Weintraub told Maureen Orth of Newsweek, "I knew the critics would never go for John. I had to get him to the people." After appearing as a guest on many shows, Denver hosted his own variety in music specials, including several concerts from Red Rocks Amphitheater. His seasonal special, Rocky Mountain Christmas, was watched by more than 60 million people and was the highest-rated show for the ABC network at that time. In 1973, Denver starred in his own BBC television series, The John Denver Show, a weekly music and variety show directed and produced by Stanley Dorfman. Denver's live concert special, An Evening with John Denver, won the 1974-1975 Emmy Award for Outstanding Special, Comedy Variety or Music. When Denver ended his business relationship in 1982 because of Weintraub's focus on other projects. Weintraub threw Denver out of his office and accused him of Nazism. Denver later told Arthur Tobier, when the latter transcribed his autobiography, "I'd bend my principles to support something he wanted of me. And of course, every time you bend your principles, whether because you don't want to worry about it, or because you're afraid to stand up for fear of what you might lose, you sell your soul to the devil." Denver was also a guest star on The Muppet Show, the beginning of the lifelong friendship between Denver and Jim Henson that spawned 2 television specials with the Muppets, A Christmas Together and Rocky Mountain Holiday. He also tried acting, appearing in The Camerons Are a Special Clan episode of the Owen Marshall, Counselor at Law television series in October 1973 and The Colorado Cattle Caper episode of the McCloud television series in February 1974. In 1977, Denver starred in the hit comedy film Oh, God! Opposite George Burns. He also hosted the Grammy Awards 5 times in the 1970s and 1980s, and guest hosted The Tonight Show on several occasions. In 1975, Denver was awarded the Country Music Association's Entertainer of the Year award. At the ceremony, the outgoing Entertainer of the Year, Charlie Rich, presented the award to his successor after he set fire to the slip of paper containing the official notification of the award. Some speculated Rich was protesting the selection of a non-traditional country artist for the award, but Rich's son disputes that, saying his father was drunk, taking pain medication for a broken foot, and just trying to be funny. Denver's music was defended by country singer Kathy Mattea, who told Alana Nash of Entertainment Weekly, "A lot of people write him off as lightweight, but he articulated a kind of optimism, and he brought acoustic music to the forefront, bridging folk, pop, and country in a fresh way. People forget how huge he was worldwide." In 1977, Denver co-founded the Hunger Project with Werner Erhard and Robert W. Fuller. He served for many years and supported the organization until his death. President Jimmy Carter appointed Denver to serve on the President's Commission on World Hunger. Denver wrote the song, I Want to Live, as the commission's theme song. In 1979, Denver performed Rhymes and Reasons at the Music for UNICEF concert. Royalties from the concert performances were donated to UNICEF. His father taught him to fly in the mid-1970s, which led to their reconciliation. In 1980, Denver and his father, by then a lieutenant colonel, co-hosted an award-winning television special, The Higher We Fly, The History of Flight. It won the Osborne Award from the Aviation/Space Writers Association, and was honored by the Houston Film Festival. In the mid-1970s, Denver became outspoken in politics. He expressed his ecologic interests in the epic 1975 song, Calypso, an ode to the eponymous exploration ship RV Calypso used by Jacques Cousteau. In 1976, Denver campaigned for Jimmy Carter, who became a close friend and ally. Denver was a supporter of the Democratic Party and of a number of charitable causes for the environmental movement, the homeless, the poor, the hungry, and the African AIDS crisis. He founded the charitable WinStar Foundation in 1976 to promote sustainable living. Denver's dismay at the Chernobyl disaster led to precedent-setting concerts in parts of communist Asia and Europe. During the 1980s, Denver was critical of the Ronald Reagan's administration and remained active in his campaign against hunger, for which Reagan awarded Denver the Presidential World Without Hunger Award in 1987. Denver's criticism of the conservative politics of the 1980s was expressed in his autobiographical folk rock ballad, Let Us Begin, What Are We Making Weapons For? In an open letter to the media, Denver wrote that he opposed oil drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. He had battled to expand the refuge in the 1980s, and he praised President Bill Clinton for his opposition to the proposed drilling. The letter, which Denver wrote in the midst of the 1996 United States presidential election, was one of the last he ever wrote. In 1992, Denver, along with fellow singers Liza Minnelli and John Oates, performed a benefit to fight the passage of Amendment 2, an anti-LGBT ballot measure that prevented Colorado municipalities from enacting anti-discrimination protections. Denver was also on the National Space Society's Board of Governors for many years. Denver had a few more U.S. top 30 hits as the 1970s ended, but nothing to match his earlier success. Denver began to focus more on humanitarian and sustainability causes, focusing extensively on nature conservation projects. He made public expression of his acquaintances and friendships with ecological design researchers such as Richard Buckminster Fuller, about whom he wrote and composed What One Man Can Do, and Amory Lovins, from whom he said he learned much. Denver also founded the environmental group Plant It 2020, originally Plant It 2000. He also had a keen interest in solutions to world hunger and visited Africa during the 1980s to witness firsthand the suffering caused by starvation and work with African leaders toward solutions. From 1973 to at least 1979, Denver annually performed at the fundraising picnic for the Aspen Camp School for the Deaf, raising half of the camp's annual operating budget. During the Aspen Valley Hospital's $1.7 million capital campaign in 1979, Denver was the largest single donor. In 1983 and 1984, Denver hosted the annual Grammy Awards. In the 1983 finale, he was joined on stage by folk music legend Joan Baez, with whom Denver led an all-star version of Blowin' in the Wind and Let the Sunshine In, joined by such diverse musical icons as Jennifer Warnes, Donna Summer, and Rick James. In 1984, ABC Sports president Roone Arledge asked Denver to compose and sing the theme song for the 1984 Winter Olympics in Sarajevo. Denver worked as both a performer and a skiing commentator, as skiing was another of his enthusiasms. Denver composed The Gold and Beyond, and sang it for the Olympic Games athletes, as well as local venues including many schools. In 1985, Denver asked to participate in the singing of We Are the World, but was turned down. According to Ken Cragen, who helped to produce the song, Denver was turned down because many people felt his image would hurt the credibility of the song as a pop-rock anthem. I didn't agree with this assessment, Cragen said, but he reluctantly turned Denver down anyway. For Earth Day 1990, Denver was the on-camera narrator of a well-received environmental television program, in partnership with Earth, with then EPA Administrator William K. Riley. Due to his love of flying, Denver was attracted to NASA and became dedicated to America's work in outer space. He conscientiously worked to help bring into being the Citizens in Space program. In 1985, Denver received the NASA Exceptional Public Service Medal for helping to increase awareness of space exploration by the peoples of the world, an award usually restricted to spaceflight engineers and designers. That same year, he passed NASA's rigorous physical exam and was in line for a space flight, a finalist for the first citizens trip on the Space Shuttle in 1986. After the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster with teacher Krista McAuliffe aboard, Denver dedicated his song, Flying for Me, to all astronauts and continued to support NASA. He entered discussions with the Soviet space program about purchasing a flight aboard one of their rockets. The talks fell through after the price tag was rumored to be as high as $20 million. Denver testified before the Senate Labor and Commerce Committee on the topic of censorship during a Parents Music Resource Center hearing in 1985. Contrary to his innocuous public image as a musician, Denver openly stood with more controversial witnesses like Dee Snider, of the heavy metal band Twisted Sister, and Frank Zappa in opposing the PMRC's objectives. For instance, Denver described how he was censored for Rocky Mountain High, which was misconstrued as a drug song. Denver also toured Russia in 1985. His 11 concerts in the USSR were the first by any American artist in more than 10 years. Denver returned 2 years later to perform at a benefit concert for the victims of the Chernobyl disaster. In October 1992, Denver undertook a multiple-city tour of the People's Republic of China. He also released a greatest hits CD, Homegrown, to raise money for homeless charities. In 1994, he published his autobiography, Take Me Home, in which he candidly spoke of his cannabis, LSD, and cocaine use, marital infidelities, and history of domestic violence. In 1996, he was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. In 1997, Denver filmed an episode for the television series Nature, centering on the natural wonders that inspired many of his best-loved songs. His last song, Yellowstone, Coming Home, composed while rafting along the Colorado River with his son and young daughter, is included. In the summer of 1997, shortly before his death, Denver recorded a children's train album for Sony Wonder, All Aboard, produced by longtime friend Roger Nichols. The album consisted of old-fashioned swing, big band, folk, bluegrass, and gospel music woven into a theme of railroad songs. It won a posthumous Best Musical Album for Children Grammy, Denver's only Grammy. His final concert was held in Corpus Christi, Texas, at the Selena Auditorium on October 5. Upon the announcement of Denver's death, Colorado Governor Roy Romer ordered all state flags to be lowered to half-staff in his honor. Funeral services were held at Faith Presbyterian Church in Aurora, Colorado, on October 17, 1997, officiated by Pastor Les Felker, a retired Air Force chaplain, after which Denver's remains were cremated and his ashes scattered in the Rocky Mountains. Further tributes were made at the following Grammy and Country Music Association Awards. In 1998, Denver posthumously received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the World Folk Music Association, which also established a new award in his honor. In 2000, CBS presented the television film Take Me Home, the John Denver story loosely based on his memoirs, starring Chad Lowe as Denver. The New York Post wrote, "An overachiever like John Denver couldn't have been this boring." On September 23, 2007, nearly 10 years after Denver's death, his brother Ron witnessed the dedication of a plaque placed near the crash site in Pacific Grove, California. Copies of DVDs of Denver's many television appearances are now sought-after collectibles, especially his one-hour specials from the 1970s and his 6-part series for Britain's BBC, The John Denver Show. An anthology musical featuring Denver's music, Back Home Again, a John Denver holiday, premiered at the Rubicon Theatre Company in 2006. On March 12, 2007, the Colorado Senate passed a resolution to make Denver's trademark 1972 hit, Rocky Mountain High, one of the state's 2 official state songs, sharing duties with its predecessor, Where the Columbines Grow. The resolution passed 50-11 in the House. defeating an objection by Representative Debbie Stafford that the song reflected drug use, most specifically in the line, "Friends around the campfire and everybody's high." Senator Bob Hagedorn, who sponsored the proposal, defended the song as having nothing to do with drugs, but rather everything to do with sharing with friends the euphoria of experiencing the beauty of Colorado's mountain vistas. Senator Nancy Todd said, "John Denver to me is an icon of what Colorado is.